She didn't receive the death penalty, but what Mackenzie Shirilla is facing now might be even more devastating. At 19, she stands at the beginning of a sentence that could swallow her entire future, a punishment stretching far beyond bars and steel doors. Inside her cell, stripped of freedom, Mackenzie isn't living the life she once imagined. She's trapped in a reality that shrinks a world into four walls and a routine that never changes. Time moves slowly here, each day blending into the next, turning minutes into something that feels like a lifetime. For someone who once craved control, her new existence is the complete opposite. Every decision is made for her. Every movement is restricted. She's no longer seen as a teenager who made a terrible mistake. She's treated as a danger, someone whose choices took lives and whose own life will now be defined by confinement. Friends, family, and the future she pictured have been replaced by silence, concrete, and the knowledge that nothing will ever return to what it was. Some believe prison is simply justice. But for Mackenzie, it's a slow unraveling of identity, a punishment reaching deeper than concrete walls. No freedom, no escape, just a lifetime shaped by one irreversible night. This is the story of what happened to Mackenzie Shirilla after the crash, after the courtroom, after the world turned against her. But to understand the life she lives now, we have to return to where everything changed on the morning of July 31st, 2022. Strongsville, Ohio woke up like any other quiet suburb. Neatly trimmed lawns, calm streets, and families beginning their day with no idea that within moments, everything would change. The sound that broke that peaceful silence wasn't a simple accident, not a routine crash, but an impact so violent it would shake the entire community and eventually the country. At just 17 years old, Mackenzie Shirilla was behind the wheel of a car speeding toward a brick wall at nearly 100 miles an hour. Inside the vehicle with her were her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and his friend, Devon Flanagan. Both young men would lose their lives within seconds, while Mackenzie survived the crash that would define the rest of her life. At first, many people struggled to understand what had actually happened that morning. The earliest theories painted it as a tragic, reckless mistake. A teenage driver going too fast, maybe distracted, maybe emotional, possibly unaware of just how dangerous her decisions were. But investigators didn't have to dig very far before the story shifted into something far darker. What looked at first like a teenage accident soon unfolded into a case that would raise questions across the state and ultimately determine Mackenzie's fate. Crash data pulled from her vehicle revealed the first disturbing clue. There were no signs of braking, none. No attempt to stop, no hesitation, just full acceleration into the wall. Surveillance footage only added to the gravity of what investigators were now seeing. The car didn't drift or swerve. It didn't attempt to slow down. It accelerated with purpose, as if a decision had been made in that final moment. Prosecutors argued that Mackenzie's actions weren't reckless. They were intentional. They believed she turned her car into something far more dangerous than a vehicle. They believed she turned it into a weapon. In court, those final seconds became the center of the case. The footage, the data, the speed, the fact that both young men inside were trapped and helpless. The judge remarked that her actions weren't just careless, they were deliberate. And for Dominic and Devon, that decision meant everything. Their futures, their families' futures, their entire lives ended the moment the car made contact with the wall. Mackenzie's defense tried to redirect the narrative. They argued that she was young, too emotional, not fully capable of understanding the weight of the moment, that she didn't intend to cause harm and that her age should be taken into account. But the prosecution pushed back with equal force, insisting that youth didn't erase accountability. That responsibility couldn't be dismissed because someone was under 20. That the gravity of the loss demanded justice. By August 2023, the court had reached its conclusion. At 19, Mackenzie Shirilla was convicted on multiple charges, including murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole only after 15 years. For the families of Dominic and Devon, it wasn't closure. Nothing could bring their sons back, but it was a measure of justice. For Mackenzie, however, the meaning was far more harrowing. Her teenage years were gone, her adulthood uncertain, her future no longer hers to shape. When the judge spoke the final words of her sentence, the transition was immediate. Mackenzie wasn't a teenager anymore. She wasn't a high school student or a daughter sitting in a courtroom. She was an inmate, handcuffed, processed, stripped of everything that once connected her to a normal life. Intake officers collected her belongings, took her fingerprints, photographed her, and handed her a uniform that replaced every trace of the identity she once had. Her first moments inside prison were unlike anything she had ever experienced. The cell was cold, small, and painfully empty. The sound of heavy doors shutting echoed through the hall, each one reminding her of the separation between her past and the reality she was now living. That first night, sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, listening to footsteps, distant voices, and the constant hum of a world she didn't understand. Her bedroom back home, bright, warm, filled with memories, was replaced with cement walls and a thin mattress that did nothing to soften the shock as the hours stretched into days. The dramatic shift from her old life to her new one became impossible to ignore. No more independence, no more freedom. Every action required permission. Every movement was monitored. The loss of control struck her harder with each passing moment. When officers called her name, she had to respond. When doors opened, she had to move. When lights turned on at sunrise, she had no choice but to start the day, whether she was ready or not. Routine began to replace shock. Meals were served at the same times every day. Head counts were strict and non-negotiable. Her mornings filled with chores or assigned programs. Afternoons passed in supervised activities. And every evening ended the same way, locked behind a door that separated her from anyone she once knew. Her cell wasn't just her room. It became her world, her cage, the place she would return to again and again, day after day. For years, nights were the hardest. Silence took over the building, broken only by the muffled sounds of other inmates. In the darkness, every thought grew heavier, every regret louder. As days passed, the monotony settled in. Each day felt like a copy of the day before. For Mackenzie, the realization came slowly but painfully. This wasn't temporary. This was her new life, her new reality. As the weeks inside turned into months, Mackenzie began to feel the deeper weight of prison. Not just the routines or the locked doors, but the crushing sense of isolation that seeped into every part of her life. The schedule kept her busy enough to fill the hours, but it couldn't silence the constant noise in her mind. Nights stretched endlessly, and without the distractions of the outside world, her thoughts became her harshest company. Regret, shame, fear, they all built on top of one another, growing heavier every day. Before prison, Mackenzie was used to constant social interaction. Friends, family, her phone, the rhythm of teenage life. Inside, all of that was gone in an instant. Letters arrived sometimes, but they were rare and never enough to fill the emptiness. Phone calls were short and expensive. Visits were infrequent, and when they ended, the walk back to her cell always felt like returning to a darker version of reality. The absence of people she once loved became a punishment of its own. The loneliness carved deeply into her mental state. Depression crept in. Anxiety grew worse. The repetitive cycle of prison life created a sense of time standing still. Days blended together, and the walls of her small cell felt closer with each passing week. Inmates often describe this experience as doing time twice. Once physically, and once in your mind. Mackenzie felt both. Fear played a role too. She wasn't prepared for the unpredictability of prison. Arguments between inmates, sudden tensions, the constant pressure to avoid conflict, her future appeals, her life sentence, all of it weighed heavily on her. Counseling services were limited, and even when she accessed them, the help rarely felt enough. She was 19, facing a future most adults could hardly comprehend. Relationships inside prison only made things more complicated. Many inmates already knew her case, and that alone created tension. Some saw her as just another young offender. Others viewed her through the lens of news headlines. The attention surrounding her case made her stand out in a place where blending in is often the safest option. Being young made her a target for curiosity. Being high profile made her a target for judgment. Friendships inside prison were nothing like the ones she once had. They came with conditions and caution. She quickly learned to be selective about who she spoke to and who she trusted. Some inmates approached her for conversation. Others offered advice or attempted to bring her into their social circles. But alliances inside prison were fragile. Relationships could shift overnight. Trust the wrong person and the consequences could be serious. Still, moments of human connection did happen. Occasionally, she met inmates closer to her age, and they shared quiet conversations about the lives they had before prison. School memories, family struggles, hopes that never came true. For a few moments, those conversations made her feel human again. But they always ended too soon, and the reality of prison reminded her to guard her emotions. Showing weakness was dangerous. Letting someone too close was risky. Conflicts were always a possibility. A single argument, a harsh comment, even a rumor could escalate quickly in an environment built on tension and survival. Mackenzie learned to stay quiet, observe more, and speak less. Her goal shifted from connection to survival. Each day inside wasn't just about passing time. It was about navigating a world where mistakes had consequences. But the hardest part of her sentence wasn't the inmates or the rules. It was the constant reminders of what she could no longer do. Freedom, something she never thought much about in her life before prison, was now the thing she missed most. Simple choices, what clothes to wear, when to go outside, what to eat, were gone. Every part of her day was chosen for her. Every moment monitored. The routines were strict and unchanging. Her contact with the outside world was limited and controlled. Phone calls monitored. Letters screened. Visits surrounded by guards. Even good moments left her with an emptiness she couldn't shake. Holidays passed without celebration. Birthdays went unacknowledged. Milestones became nothing more than reminders of the life she'd never get back. Over time, Mackenzie realized the true punishment of a life sentence wasn't just confinement. It was the loss of independence, the loss of identity, the loss of choice. Prison didn't just lock her body in place. It began to reshape her entire existence. The future, something she once thought about with excitement, now stretched endlessly in front of her. Other 19-year-olds planned careers, relationships, families. Mackenzie faced decades of the same walls, the same routines, the same locked doors. She would grow older in prison. She would watch her life unfold behind the same barriers, year after year. Time in prison doesn't move forward. It circles, repeats, stays still. As she reflected, the reality became clearer. Freedom was lost in an instant. Her life, as she once knew it, was over. And the consequences would last far longer than the moment of the crash. Mackenzie Shirilla's journey is a reminder of how one night can rewrite an entire lifetime. At 19, she stepped into a prison system that will shape every day she has left. Her story shows how a single choice can erase a future, closing every path back to normal life. Her time will continue behind steel doors, her youth fading in a place that offers no forgiveness. While the world outside keeps moving, Mackenzie remains locked in the moment everything changed, serving a sentence with no finish line. Thank you for watching this video on Court of Secrets. If you want to explore more real cases about crime, consequences, and life inside the justice system, be sure to subscribe and stay connected. More raw and revealing stories are on the way.